Hi everyone, I hope you're all having a great day so far and welcome to today's webinar. We will be discussing ThinClient technology that is Cleanroom GMP compliant. Before we get started, I just want to thank everyone so much for taking their time out of their day to join this webinar. We are really excited to get started. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. So I know you're all taking time out of your day to join this webinar, so if possible to minimize any distractions. Of course, if you miss any parts of this webinar, don't worry, we'll be sending a recording once it's over. So today we'll be sending you a lot of information, so if you're able to take any notes or provide any feedback to us, that would be greatly appreciated. And lastly, on the right-hand side, you will see our chat window. So feel free to put any questions, and then at the end of the webinar, we will answer them for you. So quickly, what we'll be going over today, first we'll be discussing the hardware. So we'll be introducing Systec and Solutions ThinManager Ready IT/OT hardware. And then next we'll be discussing how ThinManager works, why choose ThinManager, where to begin, and lastly the Q&A. So any questions that we miss in the Q&A, we will be answering through email once the webinar has finished. Now, before we get started, I want to do some introductions. So first, Keith, if you would like to start with your introduction.
Thanks, Olivia. My name's Keith Jones. I'm with Rockwell, which is the company which owns ThinManager. I've been working with ThinManager, 12 years with the company, but prior to that, another 8 years. So I've had a lot of experience with ThinManager. And my role is to look after our partners and our strategic customers across the globe, really. So I'm really pleased to be here to enable me to at least give you some reasons why you want to buy ThinManager, what it does, and the value propositions for ThinManager.
And thank you, Keith. My name is Olivia Iwaniuk. I am a sales manager on the distribution team here at Grantek. So we sell Systec and Solutions products, which we'll be going into more detail shortly. I'm located in New Jersey, and I cover the tri-state area, PA, and Massachusetts. And Mike, if you would like to go next.
Oh, thanks, Olivia. I'm Mike Lohmeyer. I head up the organization for the distribution group. As Olivia said, we're going to talk about the hardware today. I'm based out of Chicago. Olivia, myself, and the rest of our team, we support the pharmaceutical companies and biofarms who are looking for the right IT/OT hardware to put into their operations. We probably spend as much time talking about ergonomics, quality protocols, et cetera, as we do about the technology that's in it. We also do a lot of work with engineering companies and integrators who are supporting you as well. So that's our role here, and we're really excited that you took some time out to be with us.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. So Mike, if you want to take the mic and kick off this webinar.
Okay, thanks. Go advance one slide. So we want to talk about the hardware a little bit before we get into the technology Keith's going to be presenting. I have 2 units sitting here with me, one that's a tablet, one that's a larger 24-inch screen. But before we get into that, as people are working on their digital journey, digitizing, getting paper on glass, getting rid of some of the manual data entry, really one of the first things people should be considering is, what processes do I want to start digitizing? Where am I going to work first? Whether you're looking at a smaller, solution for 1 or 2 pieces of your operation, or a comprehensive MES suite for everything, you have to start somewhere and start small. Getting SOPs digitized is a very common place to start. Getting batch records digitized is a common place to start. And also finding ways to enter data using automation like barcode scanners. So maybe somewhere in part of your operations, you're weighing and premixing minor ads, hand ads, and bringing it into a different area. And it has both an alphanumeric and a 1D or 2D barcode label on it. It's great just to be able to scan it and go from there. It speeds up operations, it increases accuracy, it's good for data integrity. And these are some great places to get started. And they're some of the most common places manufacturers are getting started. Olivia, next. So another piece to consider before you get into the technology is, how are your operators functioning? What are they doing? How big is the area? How much movement do they have in their day? And are they standing in a single place and interacting with one device, where it could be very rigidly and permanently mounted? Are they moving about 3 or 4 feet from side to side? Maybe a little bit of lateral movement or some pivoting could be very helpful to them. Maybe they're going to need multiple screens and have multiple applications showing at a given time. Or quite possibly they have to move from one area where they spend part of the day and then move 20 or 30 or 50 feet somewhere else across the room for the rest of the day, but they may need a bigger piece of hardware, multiple screens, etc. And all these options are available, but understanding the ergonomics and the behavior and what an operator goes through during the course of a shift is very important to choosing what the hardware will look like before you even jump into the technology that's inside. Next slide, Olivia. So cleaning protocols, probably one of the more overlooked areas. Very often we are replacing maybe relatively equivalent computing technology, but it is not appropriate to be in a clean room. Clean rooms need to be washed down. You worry about contamination, cross-contamination, whatever your specific cleaning protocols are. We run into people who go to pHs below 2, which can be an undiluted spore cleanse, which is extremely acidic, obviously. We run into very caustic, very high pH areas, high concentrations of sodium hydroxide. Typically, if someone is using an extremely low pH acid, there's a passivation step after that with a much less acidic washdown prior to getting to another washdown, which might be isopropyl alcohol or a purified water. H2O2 hydrogen peroxide fogging is very common. There are all sorts of cleaning agents that get used. So you want to make sure the material, now there's two aspects of this. One is the material. You want to make sure the material itself can withstand any of these cleaning agents that your quality department is using. Next slide, Olivia. But in addition to the actual material, the construction, the surface is very important as well. You don't want to have any areas that enable entrapment. You don't want all those little nooks and crannies around, fins, connectors, or things that aren't properly manufactured. You want it to be manufactured from stainless steel. 304, 316L are the most common. But in addition to that, nooks and crannies and the right material, you want to make sure the edges are not rough. You want to make sure the surfaces are polished. Where there are welds, you want them ground, a nice radius. You want that polished. Even a flat surface needs to be polished because a rough surface, even if it's flat, can allow entrapment. So in addition to what the material is, how that material is used for the construction is very important as well. Next slide, Olivia. And again, I talked about mobility. I've got a couple of examples here. You can see on the image, you can see two over my shoulder. One is a Microsoft, Surface tablet. You can pick it up, carry it around by hand. This one is sitting on a pole. It can be permanently mounted somewhere. If I were to move the camera, you'd see there are wheels on the base of this. Over here, we have a full-blown IPC on a 21-inch screen and an external keyboard. This can be permanently mounted. It can be on a pole. This pole happens to be on wheels. It has batteries. You can use sealed lead acid or lithium ion. They'll give you up to 2 10-hour shifts of runtime without being plugged in. You can run them while they're plugged in. But if you take something like this, the leftmost screen in the slide you're looking at, leftmost image in the slide you're looking at, that double screen keyboard with the 5-wheel base can run 2 10-hour shifts with no cables connected, because you could run off the battery and you can have wireless Ethernet running it. And if someone needs to work over here and during part of the shift needs to go 20 feet or 50 feet to the left, you can do that. This has that capability. And these are just 4 different versions we're showing here. A tablet, upper right, you can see one that's built into the wall. And built into the wall, we can go from a 7-inch diagonal to a 32-inch diagonal, and mounted on the wall, we can go up to a 55-inch diagonal. It all depends on what it is you need to get done and how far away a person might need to be as you're looking at it. And then the bottom right is showing a mobile one that swings around from side to side, as well as pivoting on a coupling. So a person can move in a pretty good distance and have good viewing of that. You could share it between a person on the right and a person on the left, if that makes sense. There are a lot of clean room areas that are very, very constrained on space. So mobility and ergonomics is also very important. Next slide, Olivia. And then the last thing that really leads into what we're here for today, which is Keith in discussing ThinManager and the power it brings. After you understand the ergonomics and the operations and the quality and cleaning protocols, you need to start talking about what's inside there. What is your architecture? What servers? How many layers switch architecture do you have? What do you need in a client? And how much horsepower do you need in there? What operating system do you want? How many applications are you running? And what does ThinManager bring to setting this up? And once you get all the external things figured out, you start working on what's going on the inside. This is where ThinManager comes in and has a tremendous amount of value to be added. So with that, we're into the technology. I'm going to turn it over to Keith.
Thank you, Mike. So what I'm going to talk about today is ThinManager is two specific areas. Firstly, how it works, and secondly, why people buy it, why people give us money for this product. But let's start off with this poll question first of all, to see how many people that think ThinClient technology can benefit your business. I'm interested in getting the responses here, and I'll share them with you later. So Olivia, can we move on? So I'm not going to read this slide, but ThinManager is a software tool. It enables us to centrally configure, manage, and securely deliver content to devices with little intelligence. ThinClient devices, what we call zero client devices, and the content itself can come from any sources or many sources around our infrastructure, typically from servers where we're running applications. It could also be video. It could also be web content. We can deliver the content in several different ways to the devices. We don't care if these devices are virtual machines or not, or whatever. They are devices to us which ThinManager can enable you to manage. And we know that bad things happen, that servers crash and networks break. One of ThinManager's roles is to make sure that when something bad happens, the content that needs to be in front of the user is still there. And if necessary, we can arrange for that content to be placed back in front of the user within a second of a system crash. Let's move on. So I did say content delivery. Content can be any type of content you can think of practically. Typically, it's an application like an HMI, like a document interface, like a maintenance application, but it can be any particular application. It can be Excel, can be your own desktop from another building. We can deliver it like that. We can deliver content from other panel devices, other devices around your system. So if you want to see a screen that is sitting on a panel somewhere in the other building, you can pull that screen to you with what we call shadowing. Shadowing can also be extended to any terminal in the network, not just a panel. So any computer system that's got a screen on it that we want to see that screen somewhere else at the same time, we can shadow that screen. And that means we take a copy of the screen. We don't need another license for the software. We're just putting another copy of that screen on another screen. And that can be read-only or interactive. Web content, standard, we can take content from any web server, obviously, and different ways of deploying and managing that reception of that web content. And lastly, video feeds from IP cameras around your system or locally attached USB cameras. And then we deliver it in 4 distinct ways. We deliver it to devices, known terminals, mobile devices. We can deliver it to a user, a specific user, or a user by role. So somebody in operations will get the certain information that they need when they log on to a specific terminal. We can deliver it fairly uniquely by location. If you've got a mobile worker moving around and you move from one production area to another, if he's a manager, I can get the KPI information for that area automatically pushed to my mobile device. And if I move away from that area to another one, it gets taken away and another area's information gets delivered to me. If I'm a maintenance guy and I need to maintain something, I can scan a QR code on a piece of equipment and get all of the manuals and documentation and procedures needed to maintain that device. And we resolve people's locations with different technology, as well as just scanning a code. We can use Wi-Fi, so you move from one facility to another part of your facility, you'll be moving from one access point to another. If you want higher granularity, we can use Bluetooth. So you can have an operations mobile terminal, but only be permitted to operate some equipment when you're standing within a meter or two of it. And lastly, we can deliver content by events. So if something happens somewhere in my system, ThinManager can react to that and deliver content. Say somebody enters a clean room, let's bring up the video feed for that clean room and see who's walking in there and make sure that everything's fine, because we've got an alert that he's passed a barrier. Okay, let's move. So I talked about thin clients briefly. We'll talk about them a lot, of course. A thin client is a generic term to me. It means a device that may or may not have an embedded operating system. I tend to use the word thin client when I'm talking to people because of my role as to actually mean a zero client. And a zero client is a device similar to a thin client, but it has no embedded operating system or firmware installed in that device. It really is a dumb unit. The devices that ThinManager manages typically are zero clients, but we can manage both types of clients, as you'll see. Okay. So 2 types of clients once you've decided zero client. ThinManager Ready is a dedicated device from somebody like Systec, which has got a ThinManager BIOS installed in it. So it understands right from the plugin state it's going to be in a ThinManager environment. It finds a ThinManager server and it boots up. And the other type is ThinManager Compatible, which is a more off-the-shelf, if you like, even a non-clean room environment equipment, which would use a common boot technology, PXE or PXE, which is a network boot protocol, which is standard in just about every PC that hits the market for the last 5 or 10 years. All right, let's look at how it works. So from the user's experience, the top and the last line is what the user sees. A thin client powers on. Something happens, and then the next thing we see is the applications on the screen. Let's look in a little bit of detail what's going to happen when we power on the thin client. So first of all, because the thin client has no intelligence, has no operating system, it's a dumb terminal. It's got to be able to start its way in life. I liken it a little bit to a baby, where all a baby can do is cry. And the thin client has to cry and find somebody to help it. And ThinManager, in the way of a ThinManager server, is like a mom. ThinManager recognizes the baby's cry and says, okay, I got you, and goes on to the next phase. So the first thing that happens, as you see on the thin client, is a screen with a progress bar. This takes about 45, 50 seconds to download the core firmware that that device is going to need to do its job. It's a very lightweight operating system, Linux-based, but you don't even see that. It gets delivered to the thin client when the thin client gets powered on and finds the ThinManager server. The next thing that happens is ThinManager recognizes the specific device that it's delivered the firmware to, and it delivers what we call a profile. This is the content that needs to be placed on the screen. It details where it's coming from, what type of content it is, how it's laid out, all sorts of information to that. It also may download specific drivers if the device has a fingerprint reader or you has an RFID badge scanner. You may want to have the drivers for that. You may have a touch screen. That all gets catered for in this phase. And then once this phase is done, the thin client is kind of like a teenager. It knows everything now, and it moves on with its next phase. The content in the device profile is now activated. So if there is an application running on a server or multiple applications running on multiple servers, the terminal requests those processes to start, and it takes the information and delivers those applications, those screens to the terminal. And remember, it can do this in 4 ways: by just being a terminal that you know of. It can happen because somebody has logged on and they get the specific information. It can happen because this terminal is known to be in a specific location and that location has information it needs, or it can happen because something else has happened somewhere else on the network. Okay, so that's the life of the terminal. Once that happens, the terminal is fully autonomous. Let's look at why people want to buy ThinManager, and I'm going to talk about 5 distinct areas where I can quantify a return on investment. The overall return on investment, the cost of ownership reduction, is essential if you're making a business decision like this. So the first one, unscheduled downtime. Next, please. So we're increasing the overall reliability of a terminal by, first of all, we're taking the processing away from a potentially messy area or an area where computers aren't really friendly to. So we're taking it away to a nice clean room, running on a server maybe in an air-conditioned, locked-up, secure facility. We provide the ability for failover. In other words, if a server crashes, we can fail over to a secondary server. If a network breaks, we can use a different route to the server to get the information. And redundancy in case of a ThinManager server being offline. Remember, when the client starts, it must find a ThinManager server. Otherwise, it will sit there until one is present. Once it's running, it doesn't matter if the ThinManager server goes away, but we can have multiple ThinManager servers, 2 servers which are synchronized. So if the first one is offline, the ThinClient will automatically pick up its life from the second. We're replacing PCs with hard drives. So instead of moving parts, disks, and fans, which are no-nos, especially in clean environments, we're replacing those with solid-state industrial hardware, no gaps, no openings whatsoever. And as a result of all that, the mean time before failure of a ThinClient is far higher than a standard computer. I'll give an example of a customer, but I do have customers running devices like this for way over 10 years. Yeah. So the next aspect is control. I can control and manage my whole infrastructure from a single desktop at my desk. I can get remote management across the network. I can see all the status of my terminals in the ThinManager interface. So I can see if something is offline, online, I can reconfigure it, I can start it, I can stop it. Typically we deploy access to the applications, and that's all we want to see on the screen is the application that the user needs to do his job. We don't want a start menu where he can get out into the operating system and start up a game or a video or music. And we can shadow the terminals as well. As I mentioned in the previous section, shadowing is very powerful. If I'm a manager and I get a call from somebody with a problem and he's in a different building, I can pull his screen to mine. I can see what he's doing, I can see what he's typing, and I can talk him through his problem and get him to solve that without leaving my desk. It's a great time saver. So next, please, Olivia. Everybody, of course, is concerned with security these days. ThinManager delivers inherent security from the devices based from the device standpoint. But it's very easy to configure user access. We can enable user credentials not to be even seen by operations personnel. When the terminal boots, it can have credentials securely stored and use those credentials to start up the applications without the user entering. Of course, we can have user credentials either from a local ThinManager or from more typically from your Active Directory. So a user logs in, he gets extra stuff on that terminal that he needs, but he only gets it because he's logged in. There is nothing on the device. If the device is stolen or goes down, you're not losing any software licenses, you're not losing any intellectual property. Once the power is removed from a ThinClient device, it becomes a brick. And at that point, you have greatly made an investment in security. And lastly, even if the device does have a USB socket and I come along with a virus-laden USB stick and place it in that, nothing can happen. There is nothing part of the network infrastructure a ThinClient in the same way as a Windows machine. So it's completely secure from that aspect. Let's move on. Energy, okay, this is a smaller benefit, but it's still quantifiable. If I had a control room, as an example, I use a control room with 20 computers. Each computer uses 100 watts of power. That's 2 kilowatts of power. 2 kilowatts of cooling, potentially 2 kilowatts of UPS required. With a ThinClient, I can reduce that to 15 or even 10% of the energy of a PC. So again, across my whole network of infrastructure, I can calculate a payback number on being green. The next, and then the last to the S. begs to the end, of course. The ongoing operational maintenance cost of a system is the highest cost of anything. ThinManager dramatically reduces the maintenance costs of systems. So by using a remote desktop as a mainframe-like architecture, we've got fewer systems to maintain. If I have 100 computers around my process, that's a lot of maintenance. With remote desktop and ThinManager, I can reduce those 100 to 3, 4 machines maybe, where I'm running all of my physical software in a nice clean room. So if I had a security patch, urgent need to put that on, I'd have to go to those 100 computers and do that update. With ThinManager, all I need to do is to go into my ThinManager interface and check a box to take the server offline. When the server goes offline, of course, we still deliver the content from a backup server. So we can then patch that server, we can test it, we can boot it and do anything we like to it. When we're happy, we put it back online and we bring it up, and it's got the upgrade for all of the users of that machine. Rinse and repeat with the servers, and you've done a full system backup with no downtime, upgrade with no downtime. One server will serve at least 25 or more industrial users, depending on your application and the server sizing. But typically, in an HMI type environment, we see easily 25 or 50 users on a single server. The ThinClients themselves are totally maintenance free. And there's nothing to do. There's no software upgrades. There's no firmware inside that. So the only thing you need to do is replace it if it fails. And that's another benefit of a ThinClient. First of all, they're much more reliable than PCs. But if they do fail, it's a very straightforward process. I want to talk about a specific customer of mine. Next slide. This is not a pharmaceutical site. This is an industrial production site. It's a very messy plant. Actually, it's in South Africa, and they make a very fine manganese powder. It's horrible stuff, it gets everywhere. They had 50 PCs, and because of the stuff getting everywhere, even into sealed boxes, the lifetime of a PC on average was pretty short, a couple of years. So this is not a typical example, but it makes the maths easy for me. Every 2 weeks on average, there's a machine failed. So what happens when that machine fails? First of all, you have to get an engineer. Engineer's got to get a new device. He's got to put an image on it or an operating system, bound to be out of date, bring it up to date, install all of the ancillary software, licenses, etc. He then has to take it to where the failed machine is, replace it and test it and put it back in service. That was an 8-hour job for a process engineer to do that work. And while that was going on, that computer was doing real work. So you reduce the efficiency in some manner, possibly even to 0, but hopefully not. The process is down. If a ThinClient fails, it's a completely different scenario. Next slide. So first of all, you don't need to have an engineer to do this. You can replace this with a technician with a sheet of paper with a few instructions. Technician goes and gets a new device from stores. It doesn't have to be the same manufacturer, but typically you'll have the spare ones handy. You go down to where the failed one is, you unplug all the cables from it, you plug them into the new unit and power is on. ThinManager then picks up, recognizes a new child that it's not seen before, asks you what you want to do with it. And you can either create a new terminal, or it will say, are you replacing terminal station 105, which is offline right now? And it'll give you that list of the disconnected session. And you'll say, yes, this device is replacing terminal 105. And it will say, okay, I'll remember that from now on. And then it reconnects the sessions that are still running on the servers back to the device. So literally 10 minutes or so, plus a trip to stores to replace the device, your operator station is back up and running with the software that hasn't lost any processing capability. It may have been running, so hysterizing, doing anything it needs to do. Just the operator has been blind for that short period of time. Okay. So I want to summarize now with ThinManager. First of all, it's a purpose-built solution which is designed from the ground floor up for manufacturing and production environments. It's not a commercial grade VDI. You won't find it in banks and schools. You find it in just about any manufacturing facility in any industry you care to mention. It's the only end-to-end solution on the market that manages everything, from the servers and the applications right down to the physical hardware on the ThinClient itself. It's very flexible in the way it delivers content, and that content can be just about anything that you need to get to your user. It's an OT-centric solution, so we don't need IT to run up new servers, to put new computers in, new operating systems. It's designed to be managed, configured by the engineering and maintenance teams once up and running. It's extremely simple to deploy and manage. You can install it in a day. You can be up and running in a few hours. And it's a centrally managed architecture. That means I've got an overall one desk to manage everything system, which will deliver a solid return on investment across the board. Okay, with that, I think we have one more poll question. Yeah. So I wanted to see, I got some interesting answers from the previous poll. We'll probably go through those at the end. I wanted to see if you're using ThinManager, great. If not, I would like to see how effective I've been at getting a message across to you and to get out about ThinManager. Okay, thank you, Olivia. I think it's over to you.
I think I'm jumping in here. Just as next steps, if people are wondering, where do you go based on what you've learned? Obviously, it's a lot to take in. From what you heard from Keith, there's a lot of capability and impact it has to your architecture. But really, some of the fundamentals come first. Just what am I trying to replace? What paper am I trying to replace? And put digital technology in place. Where is it? What are the quality issues there? What are the cleaning protocols there? What are the operator ergonomics and interaction with the equipment through the whole period of time? And then what software is being run, and then how do I choose the platform for it to be on, and what is the best use of ThinManager for doing that? And in doing this, there are a lot of peripheral devices, scanners being probably the most common, so that printed labels can be alphanumeric, of course, for the operator read, but 1D and especially 2D barcode makes things, very, very smooth in your operation. Somebody, reads it with a scanner or a gun, and away you go, and the data's been entered, and it's accurate, and it's very quick. Biometric authentication is something that comes up. And we actually do have quite a few people who put printers in their clean room areas, and I don't have a box sitting here, but we have boxes for printers that can be put in a room, either built into a wall, flush mounted, or sitting on a desktop, and has a big door so you can access the printer, and a little door so you can just reach in and get a label as needed. But all of these are really things to be thought about. And then understanding what ThinManager is going to do for the overall architecture, of course, is a key piece of that. So, before we get into answering some of the questions, Jeff, I'm assuming some came in, and Keith's going to go over some of the poll questions. If you have a question, just send an email into distribution@grantek.com, and we'd be happy to respond to you. So, Jeff, Olivia, I don't know if we have questions that'll come in or results to the polls.
Yep. So I put up 2 poll questions. Remember, right at the start, I asked you how did you think ThinManager could benefit your business? And it was kind of a trick question. As you probably realized by the end of the session, the first one was it enables maintenance-free devices to replace PCs. The second one, it improves security with a more secure interface. The third was reduces operational management costs. And it does all 3 of those. I had only one response that said, I'm not aware of what ThinClient technology is. Well, I hope now that that's a different scenario. Very encouraged by the opinion of ThinManager, and also encouraged by the number of you on here that are already ThinManager users. In fact, over half of you. So that's fantastic. And for all of us who requested some information and wanted to learn more, Olivia and Mike will definitely be back to follow up with you on these specifics.
Yes,
Okay.
and I want to jump in here and thank you guys for joining our webinar today. Now we're going to start the Q&A. So I know a few of you had put some questions in the chat box, so we'll get ahead and get started with the questions. If we, for some reason, run out of time and we're not able to answer your question, we will respond in an email right away with the response.
Okay, so if I go through the ones that I can see in the chat, first of all, Olivia, there might be some more on your side, but a couple, all on topic. First of all, yes, somebody's got all of the above for the poll, so he couldn't answer all three because we didn't let you, but you're right, there was all of the above. Do we have a mobile or Wi-Fi enabled thin client unit? To my knowledge, there's no devices available that will boot from Wi-Fi from a startup because there's no Wi-Fi BIOS. However, we have 3 products that enable you to use mobile devices. We call them ThinManager clients, or TMC. We have a WinTMC, ATMC for Android, and iTMC for iOS. And those applications will enable the mobile device to be managed and act exactly like a thin client device inside ThinManager. Question was, does a thin client need an IP address? Yes, it does. And it will get assigned one when it boots up. Either in, depending on what the device or your policies are, you can use your DHCP servers. You can physically use a hard locked IP address for ThinManager. Or you can do a combination. You can use a ThinManager to provide an IP address from a pool that it knows about. But it will work in with your policies there. What makes ThinManager environment better than others on the market? I think it's a unique environment because it's only for manufacturing. It's operator centric. It's OT centric for its management. It does things that ordinary commercial VDI products can't do or don't need to do, like failover and reliability. In manufacturing, being blind or offline for 20 minutes very often can mean a ruin of a batch, a very expensive process. So you don't need to have the need to spin up a new PC. And I believe it's so simple to use. You'll try it, you'll love it, put in a small system, and I guarantee you won't look back. There's some documentation questions. I can address those directly because they're specific. Do I have rephrase the question, do I have a thin client model with a Wi-Fi option? Okay. The thin client itself, you can use a device connected to, say, a Wi-Fi access point or a Wi-Fi router, which delivers a connection, a pre-made connection to your Wi-Fi infrastructure. But there's no, to my knowledge, Wi-Fi enabled thin client devices that will boot when you power them on with Wi-Fi, because there's no Wi-Fi BIOS. If there is, we are, and I have to say, we are looking at this technology. Now we've acquired a thin client company a couple of years ago. We're actually looking at putting this together. It would be a first to my knowledge. What does a statement ThinManager ready thin client have a ACP BIOS? Okay, the BIOS in a ThinManager ready device, when you power on a PC, it boots into a BIOS first of all. And the BIOS does things like select where you're going to boot from. You have a list, first is the hard drive, second is a USB port, third might be a network. The ThinManager BIOS says, this is a ThinManager device. It's going to boot from a network. There's no other alternative. And I can pre-configure the server addresses of the ThinManager servers in the device. So all I need to do is plug it into the network, power it on, and it will come straight up. Not sure on the last question there. You're in a USB dongle to connect. You can use a USB dongle in certain ways, but what do you mean? Like a Wi-Fi dongle? Again, the BIOS itself, if it needs to have a network connection to start up, and that yeah, that's not going to be Yeah, that's not going to work. No.
And I do have
because the BIOS won't recognize the device. At that time, the USB stack is not loaded in the BIOS.
And I do have a couple more questions that have come through. I have one for Mike. How do people typically digitize standard operating procedures?
Well, that's a great question. It depends a lot on the size of the operation. What we're seeing a lot right now for especially the smaller biopharms, biotechs, is using tablets and getting it on tablets and allowing the operator to follow, instructions, visuals, diagrams, check off as they're working, and put it right on there. And it's a quick, I don't want to say easy, but it's a quick and easy way to get started. One of the more common first things we see. Sales of the tablets are very high, and this is one of the more common applications.
Awesome, thank you. And then I'm seeing another one come through. This one is for Keith. Are ThinClients more reliable than PCs? I am susceptible to downtimes, which can be costly. Sorry about that.
And I think hopefully I answered that fairly comprehensively, but yes, they are far more reliable, both from a physical reliability standpoint. They are solid state boxes. When I used to demo ThinManager, I would take out a ThinClient device, I would drop it on the floor from about 1 meter high, and then I'd pick it up and I'd plug it into my demo and everything would carry on. They're physically much more reliable, but they're also much more longevity. I use on a ballpark 7 to 10 years. A ThinClient will last in an environment, 3 to 5 for a PC. So the reliability comes from both aspects. Yes.
Awesome. And I'm getting a few more coming through. This one's for Mike. If an operator is moving around, do they need to carry a device in their hands at all times?
No, and you probably wouldn't want anybody doing that. We do have. Let me grab this. The Surface tablet. This is a Microsoft Surface. Stainless steel, easy clean. You can have a handle on it, which does make it easier to clean. You are still looking at a 4-pound device, and you don't want to hold this all day. You can certainly carry it around all day, but you can have a support like what I'm putting it in. That support can be mounted, on a flat horizontal work surface. It can be mounted on the wall, or where I have it behind me, you can see it moving. It's on a pole with wheels. So if someone's carrying it around all day and moving all day, they need to set it down at some point in time. You can't have that in your arms all day. And one thing that can come with this, I don't have one with me, is we do have a glass keyboard that is Bluetooth, has no cables from the keyboard to the tablet. So if you want to have a physical keyboard, if someone's interacting with it all day and may want to have the whole screen for visual, and then a full keyboard for typing, that can be tethered to it as well and work that way.
Awesome, thank you. And I am getting a few more that are coming through. Another one is, I can answer this one actually. Can you use glycol to clean this hardware? Yes, you can use glycol. There is a list. Systec Solutions has tested a handful of cleaning products on their hardware, and that is definitely on the list. If you're interested in getting more information about that, I can send it to you after the webinar.
And one thing, I'll interrupt here if that's okay. We Systec Solutions, I'm with Grantek, but Systec Solutions, they have their hardware tested and rated, certified by Rockwell. So their hardware has gone into Rockwell. It has been tested. It is, Rockwell rated as ThinManager ready. There are hardware providers who test their own and they feel it's working. Systec has sent theirs to Rockwell to be tested. So it is, certified by Rockwell to be a ThinManager ready device. I should have mentioned that earlier.
Perfect, thank you. You're getting a lot of questions flying through. I have one for you, Keith. Someone wants to know, how can I try out ThinManager?
Oh, that's a good one. Yes. Well, first of all, the main repository for all ThinManager information is thinmanager.com. If you go to that site, you'll find a lot of information, documentation, free product downloads. There is also a link to download a 30-day license so you can try ThinManager out on your own. So I encourage you to have a look and browse around that site, and then when you know what you want to try, get back to Olivia or Mike, and we'll take it from there and help you get yourself up and running with a proof of concept.
Definitely.
Another question I had in my chat was about documentation, and I'm going to answer that one offline because it's a specific question. Yes, I can get you the documentation that you particularly need.
Awesome, thank you. And then I do have a question for Mike.
Oh, good.
Can you have wireless Ethernet so we can avoid the Cat6 cable?
Yes, Cat6 being the cable we all plug into a device if we're wired. Yeah, wireless is available on every unit that we have. It's a standard option. Just when you're going through the menu of options available, you just click on it and you select it. You can't quite see it. It's on the back side of this one, and if I run the risk of twirling it around, I'm going to pull a cable or something. But on the back side, where the pole mounts into the back of the IPC, the antenna is inside there, and there's a non-metallic cover over it that does meet clean room cleaning protocol requirements, and it communicates through there. You can also have, you can also bring in a Cat6 if you want.
Perfect. Thank you for answering that. So we are getting close to the end, so that will wrap up our Q&A. Any questions we didn't get to that was in the chat box, we will address it through email shortly. I just want to thank everyone so much for taking the time out of their day again, attending our webinar. I hope it was beneficial for you and you learned a lot. And if you have any other questions, you can email info@grantek.com, and we will also be sending you the recording once it's available.
All right. Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the time.